Whew. All right, hey everyone. I really just couldn't help but make a review for this game. I don't really do game reviews, though maybe I'll start because this was weirdly fun, despite how much I dislike this game. But I hope you either find this informative or entertaining or both. Oh boy, here we go. Not looking forward to reliving all these details. Oh, okay. So, you know when you're arguing with friends or random people on the internet about which superheroes would win in a fight with each other, and then that one jerk is always just like, whoever the writer wants to win? Well, it seems like all those jerks banded together to make a video game. This game is the epitome of taking the whoever the writer wants to win argument too far. Obviously, we all know that superheroes and their power scales are flexible and change all the time. I mean, Superman started out as a guy whose powers were literally limited to faster than a speeding bullet, more powerful than a locomotive, and able to leap tall buildings in a single bound. And now he can punch holes in reality and outlive the end of existence. But there's always at least some reasonable degree of continuity within the current canon when it comes to superheroes and their powers. This game goes with a different approach. This game says, screw it, whatever needs to happen to progress the plot is what's going to happen, regardless of whether it makes any damn sense. This is taken so far that the game just blatantly puts zero effort into explaining how anything is even happening. I mean, somehow the Justice League, the most notoriously OP and unbeatable superhero team ever, gets absolutely dog-walked by everybody in this game. It almost feels like whoever wrote the story for this game had a personal vendetta against the Justice League, like the characters themselves, the concept of the League, and they just absolutely needed a story where the League gets painted as a bunch of pathetic fools. Now, before I get into all the reasons why this game is so disrespectful to DC fans, DC Comics itself, the Justice League and all its members, the legacy of the Arkham games, and the great late Kevin Conroy, I'm going to start with aspects of the game that didn't make me want to stick my head underneath the Batmobile tires and tell Batman to floor it. So, on a technical level, the game's pretty decent. Now, what I mean to say is the gameplay is fun for the most part, and the traversal is fairly generous. There isn't ever really a point where you feel like you've just been like flying through the city or walking through the city forever and ever trying to get from one objective to the other. The mission designs do get somewhat repetitive, especially if you stick around for the post-game content, at which point you're essentially just replaying the same three missions over and over again with increasing levels of difficulty. That being said, I've played the game for just about 25 hours at this point and haven't run into any glitches, bugs, soft locks, or other frustrating just game problems that you might run into. And all that to say that the game is designed well as a video game, entirely independent from the context. This game can be enjoyable at times. Another positive I'll give the game is the first 5-ish hours of story/gameplay. Up until the first boss fight, the story was actually pretty compelling, and it was fun to explore the Hall of Justice and Metropolis, and the threat of the evil Justice League actually comes across in a way that's pretty badass, while also doing a pretty excellent job of making you believe the threat you're facing is legitimate. For example, right after you gear up and leave the Hall of Justice, near the very start of the game, Green Lantern shows up after you've defeated a handful of Brainiac soldiers, and he immediately captures you in his constructs and drags you around the city while you're completely at his mercy, and he makes you watch as he and the Brainiac soldiers kill people and torture them, and it's a very unnerving series of scenes, but in a way that feels very compelling and does a great job of setting the stage and making it clear how much of a suicide mission this really is. Then shortly after that, you encounter Batman, and you basically experience what it was like for the goons in the previous Arkham games. You're wandering around in this dark building trying to find and kill Batman, and he's just using his gadgets and the vents and rafters and fear takedowns and whatnot to take down every member of the squad, including you. And it's actually a really cool aspect of the game where, again, they're establishing the context of just how incredibly screwed you are and how impossible defeating the League is going to be. Unfortunately, after these first two encounters with the League members, you don't really interact with them again, and I mean all the League members, not just Batman and Lantern, until you begin killing them. At which point, all the props I just gave the game get thrown out the window in the most unceremonious ways possible. Yeah, that made sense. A more technical critique I want to share before I leap into the dumpster fire that is the rest of the game is just about the lack of uniqueness when it comes to the playable characters. You could replace any of the 4 squad members with any 4 random humans with guns and jetpacks or whatever traversal equipment you want to give them, and the gameplay would essentially be exactly the same. I mean, when you're playing a superhero game, the gameplay needs to reflect that fact. When you play other superhero games, like the previous Arkham games or the Spider-Man games, the movesets, skills, weapons, tools, and just the regular movement throughout the world reflect the fact that you're playing as Batman or Spider-Man. This game fails almost entirely on that front. All you're really doing is shooting things, regardless of which character you play as, and while there is some minimal effort to give each character a unique special attack that utilizes their specific skills, weapons, or powers, most of the gameplay is just running and gunning. You don't feel like you're playing as Harley Quinn, an acrobatic hand-to-hand combatant. You don't feel like you're playing as King Shark, an Atlantean demigod with super strength, sharp claws, and nearly impenetrable skin. You don't feel like you're playing as Captain Boomerang, an agile and incredibly quick inventor who uses a variety of specialized boomerangs to fight and be a general nuisance in Flash's behind. The only character that really fits the mold of the gameplay is Deadshot, because his whole shtick is guns to begin with. That's what he does. This game probably would have benefited from building the moveset and gameplay around a single character, like Deadshot or Harley, and then having the rest of the squad be controlled by AI and be NPCs. Yes, kind of similar to what they did with the Guardians of the Galaxy game, where you only played as Star-Lord and the rest of the team fought alongside you. And, you could do combos and stuff with them, but you didn't play as them. And that way they were able to dedicate the gameplay build around one specific character instead of having to sacrifice it in order to have, gameplay for multiple different characters. The main point being that a lot of the time this game doesn't feel like a superhero game, but more along the lines of something like Destiny, where, you're fighting powerful enemies and stuff, but it's really just about spraying and praying. And that's a really unfortunate aspect of the game, especially considering what I'm about to say. Okay, now we're getting into the bad stuff. The logic of the plot falls apart incredibly quickly as soon as the Flash boss fight begins. Now, as I was getting closer to the Flash fight, I assumed the way they would explain how this extremely weak group of characters was defeating the Justice League would be that Wonder Woman was helping them with every fight, because, spoiler alert, Wonder Woman, well, she doesn't get turned by Brainiac, obviously. We know that from the trailers and stuff like that, but it just made sense to me. I was like, okay, obviously Wonder Woman will be helping because she's the only one in this game that reasonably stands a chance against any given member of the Justice League. Well, I was completely wrong, and Wonder Woman does not help with a single boss fight throughout this entire game. So, whatever. Despite how many story problems that would have solved. And I honestly couldn't explain to you how I beat Flash. I could tell you what happened, but I can't explain it to you. Now, before anyone thinks, well, they explained that you had a Speed Force dampener to make Flash slower as a potential reasonable explanation, it isn't. Flash is probably the second most powerful being in the universe, aside from Superman. Slightly slowing him down shouldn't make him susceptible to regular gunfire, especially since in the game, during the boss fight, even when he's slowed down by the dampeners, you can literally see that he can still move faster than your bullets, which is like over 2,500 feet per second. I literally looked it up. I mean, the average speed of a bullet or whatever. The only possible explanation I can come up with as to how I killed him is that he just chose not to walk up to each member of my team, stick his hand in our chests, and instantly kill us. Which he could have done at any time, which was also literally showcased by the game. I mean, in one of the cutscenes, Lex uses the speed dampener on Flash. The entire squad unloads their weapons on him while he's sitting still from the knockback. A truck explodes in his face, and he just shakes it off. I mean, he gets up, and he's fine. Sure, his suit had some dents in it from the bullets and the explosion, but he was entirely uninjured. And not 2 minutes later, Flash zips by Lex, phases his hand through his chest, rips Lex's heart out, and runs away. Just like that, easy peasy. So we literally know in the story of the game that Flash knows how to do that. Like, he knows how to phase through people and like rip people's hearts out and stuff. Yet when it comes to his boss fight, all he does is throw lightning bolts at you from a distance and constantly generate twisters that are incredibly easy to dodge. And you literally just shoot him to death. I mean, you have to shoot, like, the lightning bolt things form like these lightning bubbles, and you have to shoot those, and it, like, for whatever reason, that weakens him. I don't understand the logistics of it at all. And when he enters, like, his weakened state, he gets winded. The Flash doesn't get winded. So, you know, whatever. Anyway, you just shoot him. I mean, that's it. You dodge the twisters, you dodge the lightning bolts, and you literally just shoot him to death. You shoot the fastest man alive with normal bullets, and it fucking works. And what makes it worse is they literally make a joke early in the game about how trying to shoot Flash is completely pointless because it simply can't be done. I mean, Boomerang and Flash both make the joke, which that actually, I'll give the game props really quickly. I saw people ragging on this joke, and it doesn't deserve to be ragged on because the joke isn't the actual line. It's the fact that Boomerang knows Flash so well that he knew Flash would make the joke about, like, mailing him the bullet. So first of all, that was a funny joke. But again, it completely fucks the story later on because you already told us that shooting him doesn't work. And you've already shown that he can just walk up to anyone at any time and just pluck their heart out, and it's just over. And he just doesn't do those things. He just doesn't dodge the bullets, and he doesn't just walk up to you and kill you, which he could do at any moment. And I think what makes it worse is that they could have at least had like a series of QuickTime events or something that involves some more elaborate method of taking him down as opposed to just shooting him. Like, maybe get the health bar down all the way and then do a QuickTime event, like in like God of War or something, like, you know, old God of War, or like Force Unleashed, how they used to do that in those games. Regardless, you know, it's a very heartless and disgraceful end for the Scarlet Speedster. Now, you know, it really is shame on me, though, because I let them fool me twice. I must have still been in denial because after the atrocity of the Flash fight, I immediately clung to my hope that the rest of the league wouldn't face such blatant disrespect. I was thinking maybe the Flash fight was just easy because it was the first boss. Maybe they'll get harder, or the way the rest of them will die, or the way the rest of them die will make more sense in terms of the lore and the story. I could not have been more wrong. The second boss fight is Green Lantern. And let me tell you, John fared no better against the almighty frickin' Suicide Squad than Flash did. It might be somewhat dramatic to say that there was absolutely no difference between the Flash and Green Lantern boss fights, but honestly, there wasn't. And while sure, the actual animation of what was happening was different, because obviously you're dealing with like Speed Force powers and Green Lantern powers, the gameplay of the boss fight was basically identical. Instead of dodging your attacks until entering his vulnerable state like Flash did, Green Lantern simply had a shield that made him invincible. And of course, you use another Deus Ex Machina device that magically takes away all of Green Lantern's powers. It was some sort of like miniaturized Yellow Lantern battery that somehow made your bullets generate yellow energy, like fear. And I honestly don't think they put any thought into that device beyond, hey, wasn't Green Lantern just weak to the color yellow once upon a time? Yeah, let's just do that. Because that's literally what happens. I mean, you literally just create yellow stuff, and the yellow stuff hits Green Lantern, and his shield just deactivates. And I'm like, yeah, excuse me, Green Lantern hasn't been weak to the color yellow in like 20 years. Maybe, probably even longer. I don't remember exactly when they got rid of that, but all I know is it's stupid, and I'm glad it's gone. But apparently not in this universe. Because, you know, it doesn't even make sense if you try to go at it from like, oh, well, they were making him feel afraid. And I'm like, why would he be afraid of us? That doesn't make any sense. Anyway, instead of avoiding, but I digress. Instead of avoiding lightning bolts and twisters like in the Flash fight, you just have to avoid constructs that would explode. And constructs that would explode, and waves of helicopter constructs that would sweep the battleground and just kind of like fire at you from the sky. And you had to destroy those constructs as you went, like as you avoided them, to weaken Green Lantern's shield, and then you just shot him with regular bullets until he died. There was no dramatic cinematic death, just like with Flash. Once you got his health bar all the way down, he just killed over and died. That was it. He just fell over in the dirt and he was gone. Now, I'm going to save Batman for last, even though he wasn't the last evil League member to fall, simply because his history in the Arkhamverse is so much more fleshed out. So, next up is Superman. Superman gets like one iota of respect more than the other three, simply because his boss fight had a stage 2. Like, when you get his health bar down the first time, he just gets pissed off and goes in like sun dips for a second, and like he flies up into the sun, in case people don't know what that means, and then he comes back down. He's like, oh, my health bar is back, and then you just beat his ass again. That being said, the Superman fight was just as stupid as Flash and Green Lantern, because he was just attacking the environment around me rather than actually attacking me directly, which is exactly what Flash and Lantern did, in case I didn't make that clear. They're not really like targeting you. Like, Lantern just makes constructs that are randomly placed on the map. Flash is just kind of randomly throwing lightning bolts and twisters everywhere. They're not actually attacking you, and it's not thought out well at all. It's not planned well in terms of trying to make the fight seem real. And all any of those three would have had to do was just aim a single attack at each of the squad members, and they would have all instantly died. I mean, the whole time I was fighting Superman, I was just yelling at my TV like, Clark, just fucking hit me. Why are you freezing random shit around the park? Just please kill me. I'm begging you. Don't let the squad beat you. And sure, the game explains how you're able to fight Superman by having the other Lex from like a different universe invent gold kryptonite and give you bullets tipped with gold kryptonite. But still, they really couldn't even allow Superman to have a cinematic death. You just keep shooting him with bullets until he dies. And just like all the others, he just falls down in the dirt like he's nothing. And that's it. You just move on. There's no big dramatic finish or anything. He just dies and you leave. Now we're going to get to Batman. I can't keep talking about Superman. It's going to piss me off. Now, I tend to get annoyed when, the Bat fanboys won't shut up about how Batman can beat anyone with prep time, because it's just not true. That being said, Batman literally gets defeated by being unprepared in this game. And that might be the most ridiculous thing to ever happen in the history of fiction, not because it's impossible for Batman to be prepared, because it isn't. And not because Batman is unbeatable if he is prepared, because he isn't, but because the thing that finally overwhelmed Batman, the one thing he couldn't plan for, the one contingency he didn't have, was Harley Quinn. The sidekick of the Joker that he spent the entire Arkham franchise slapping around like she was nothing. Harley Quinn, armed with fear toxin, that she somehow exposed to Batman while she was being exposed to Batman's fear toxin. Now, this next series of events is going to get confusing. I was confusing myself while I was thinking about how I was going to talk about this. I mean, you sneak into the Batcave. Okay? Batman obviously knows you broke in and immediately floods the place with lethal amounts of fear toxin. Harley's brilliant plan is to have the whole team overdose on that fear toxin, because for some reason, which they never explain, overdosing on fear toxin cures you of fear toxin, which that's not how any drug works, but all right. Then, while overdosing on that fear toxin, Harley pulled her own fear toxin out of her ass that apparently she's been working on since like her early days at Arkham. And for whatever reason, Batman is extremely susceptible to this new fear toxin for, again, unexplained reasons. Now, I know what you're thinking. What the hell did I just listen to? And trust me, I get it. Especially given the fact that Batman literally mastered overcoming fear toxin in the previous Arkham game in order to save Gotham. So what? He can't do that now? Why? Why can't? Why he's not immune to it anymore? Right? Okay, I understand why. Because the story can't happen unless you invent some bullshit way to defeat Batman with his own tools. All of that is just the build-up to the actual boss fight, which is probably the worst boss fight in the history of video games. And I'll say this, even though what happens in the Batcave, like with the fear toxin thing, is dumb, that part of the game was kind of cool, because it's similar to when you first interact with Batman. You're wandering through a dark building, and he's just jumping out at you, and it's terrifying. That part was cool, but the rest of it was awful. So, Does anyone remember? Like I was saying, the Batman boss fight, probably the worst boss fight in the history of video games. So does anyone remember the Nightmare DLC from Arkham Knight, where you were in the Batmobile and the giant scarecrow hallucinations would fire beams of fire or fear toxin or whatever, and you just had to like dodge and hold the trigger down until you killed the illusion? Yeah, okay, that's literally the Batman boss fight, except you're not in a Batmobile. I mean, he even dramatically screams no when he gets defeated, just like Scarecrow, as the giant hallucination of Nightmare Batman crashes into the ground in slow motion and the screen flashes white to signify that you're waking up from the nightmare. I mean, they were too lazy to even include a boss fight for Batman, so they just reskinned DLC from the previous game. I'll get the details. I'm sorry. I'll get to the details surrounding Batman's actual death in a moment. And then I'll talk about Wonder Woman, but since neither of them actually died during boss fights, I'm going to talk about them along with some other story problems that exist outside the boss fights. Now, I realize I've spent a great deal of time talking about the boss fights, and honestly, I just wanted to get that out of the way because they're all terrible. And, you know, they're just so lazily designed and extremely disrespectful to the characters. So I'm going to switch gears a little bit and run through some more problems really quickly that are abominations to the lore of the Arkhamverse and DC in general, they're so inherently stupid that there's really no point in attempting to elaborate on them because there was clearly no thought put into any of this stuff. One thing that really rubbed me the wrong way almost immediately is the sheer disrespect that the squad members show toward the League when they kill them. I mean, after you kill Flash, King Shark, I think, says something like, wow, it really sucked that we had to do that. He was a great warrior. But everyone else is high-fiving and calling them names and making a joke of the whole thing. And, like, Boomerang even, like goes like he's about to, like, pee on Flash's dead body and stuff like that. Now, I mean, they stop him from doing that, but still. And, you know, obviously, I discussed the specifics of this in some detail already, but the way the League members all suddenly seem to forget how to use their powers as soon as the boss fights start, and the fact that they all die just from being shot too much shows a certain level of disrespect and laziness from the writers and developers that is entirely uncalled for and unjustified. I mean, then, you know, the entire game features the Hall of Justice as the base of operations for the squad. And we know, according to various cutscenes and interactions with Batman, that he's still plugged into the Justice League systems, you know, citywide, globally, whatever. So it's like, why in the actual literal hell does nobody from the Justice League just pull up to the hall and destroy the place and kill everyone inside? I mean, all the gear and weapons and planning for how to stop them was being created and done there. And they just sit back and allow it to happen. Even after the point in the game where they actually acknowledge the squad and Argus as a threat. And another dumb thing, through the data recording collectibles, you don't actually have to go collect these ones. There are some recordings that you do have to collect, but not these. You naturally unlock these through story progression. You find out how exactly the fight between Brainiac and the League started and how they ended up getting defeated so easily. And it's one of the worst details in the game. So it turns out Superman and Lantern agreed that they should go talk to Brainiac and see if he was friendly. Like when the Skull Ship showed up in the sky in Metropolis, they saw it and they were like, well, let's just go talk to him. It'll probably be fine. And they had no sort of backup plan or anything about what they should do if he turned out not to be friendly. Batman, Wonder Woman, and Flash are like, I don't know if that's a great idea, guys. Maybe we shouldn't do that. And then immediately, they're all just like, screw it, might as well. And they agree to Superman and Green Lantern's awful plan. And to make matters even worse, all 5 of them decide that all 5 of them will go up to the Skull Ship together. So they all just walk straight into the enemy base with no plan B. At which point, given their overwhelming collective stupidity, Superman, Lantern, and Batman are all immediately captured and turned, and the fight is lost before it even begins. So, you know, this game, it left me wondering what Waller is so concerned about when it comes to the League being a potential threat to the world, especially this version. Because if this game is to be believed, any group of idiots with no teamwork skills whatsoever can bond and become a coordinated enough fighting force to defeat the entire Justice League in a span of like 2 days. The Justice League wasn't even able to hold Metropolis for a single month before being wiped out by some C-listers with guns. And I almost forgot to mention the other small detail that makes the boss fights and the disrespect to the League even more abhorrent. At no point in any cinematic following any boss fight is a single member of the squad even remotely injured. I mean, the League members, after you kill them, look like they were in a one-sided battle against a sweat in Mortal Kombat, just covered with blood and bruises and lacerations. And the squad is just perfectly uninjured, no problem. I mean, it's not like they fought Superman to the death or anything. Why would they be injured? And I may as well mention this now because I'm not giving this nonsense the time of day later, but the Brainiac boss fight is just another excuse to disrespect Flash. The developers, again, were too lazy to even create a moveset for Brainiac at all. At least Batman had his own mechanics, even if they were terrible. Brainiac literally just downloads Barry's DNA or whatever into his body and replicates his powers, so the Brainiac final boss fight is just the Flash fight again. Same rules and everything. The only difference is you get attacked by Brainiac soldiers here and there during the fight. Now, I'm going to get into like the three big things that really bother me the most, and I think one of them is going to be a little bit repetitive, but I go into a little bit more detail. It's something that I mentioned really early on in the video. So, first of all, the magnitude of the Batman disrespect. They casually mention that Robin was also killed by Batman, and they imply that the entire Bat family was killed as well, meaning Nightwing, Robin, Red Hood, and Oracle. And that just disrespects those characters and Batman even more because it implies that the people literally trained by Batman weren't a good enough team to beat Batman, but the damn Suicide Squad is. Well, it's not 100% clear that they were all killed by Batman or just Robin. Either way, it's just another nail in the Arkham coffin, Now, for the part that really stings, Batman literally dies for no reason. Here's the series of events that leads to Batman's death. The squad magically becomes immune to fear toxin by overdosing on it. No idea how that works. The squad beats Batman's ass so badly he passes out. The squad captures and secures Batman at LexCorp. After Lex is done doing whatever it was he was doing to Batman, the squad takes Batman to the middle of Metropolis and executes him to get Superman's attention. But Superman doesn't show up to save Batman or anything. He just waits till they kill him. We already know from the story at this point that Brainiac acknowledged the squad as a legit threat by this point, as had Batman. Brainiac would have sent Superman to kill the squad anyway once they revealed themselves. They also could have just tortured Batman or something to lure Superman out. The whole reason they hurt him in the first place is to lure Superman out. Killing him was literally just because the story wanted Batman dead and because Harley felt like it. They could have just left Batman with Lex. He was secured. He wasn't going anywhere. Gone outside, called Superman names or whatever until he showed up, and the story could have progressed the same. But no. And it's also the fact that with everything I just said, they established in the game that it is possible to subdue the League members without killing them, like Batman. And nobody thought to go, hey, let's subdue them, kill Brainiac, and after he's dead, then maybe the mind control will wear off, and if not, then we kill them. And it just goes to show how little thought was put into the story, or rather, how much thought was put into forcing the plot to result in the deaths of all the League members for the sake of trying to be dramatic. Okay, now let's finally address Wonder Woman. Wonder Woman is the only member of the League who isn't ever turned to Brainiac's side, and I think I mentioned that earlier. Throughout the game, you hear about her trying to fight Lantern and Flash and how they keep forcing her to fight among civilians, and in her attempts to save people, they take advantage and keep hurting her and forcing her to retreat before being captured. At one point, Wonder Woman forges a kryptonite shield, and this is one of the few props I can give the game when it comes to the way kryptonite works on Superman. The game unintentionally nails it. Most movies and shows and a lot of other forms of media make it seem like kryptonite, even a small little sliver, if it's anywhere near Superman, he'll just immediately lose power and fall over like he gets super sick out of nowhere. In actuality, it just evens the playing field, makes him a little slower, weaker, and more vulnerable. Over time, if he's exposed for a long enough period, Eventually, it will get him to that passed out, can't move state, but he could just fly away or destroy it before then. So when Wonder Woman confronts Superman with her kryptonite shield, it works the way it's meant to. It makes Wonder Woman have a fighting chance, but it's still a hell of a fight. Now, the game later makes a throwaway comment that Brainiac's control over Superman was making him more immune to the kryptonite than usual, which shows the developers really just don't know what they're doing because they thought they needed to explain something away that already made sense. Regardless, Wonder Woman's shield isn't enough, and Superman shatters it, and the Squad interferes before he can land the killing blow on Wonder Woman. And this was the moment I knew the game had no intention of honoring the importance of the characters in the Justice League or what they stood for. I mean, the pointlessness of Wonder Woman's death and sacrifice made me physically ill, and I'm not kidding. The entire game shows Wonder Woman refuse to give up hope, refuse to give in to the easy solution, killing her friends, standing against impossible odds in overwhelming despair and remaining true to the idea of the Justice League and what it means to be a hero. And in that final moment of despair, when she realizes Superman is too much for her and he must be stopped, she takes advantage of the extra second that the Squad bought her, plunges a shard of kryptonite from her broken shield into his chest, giving up everything she stands for in the desperate hope that with Superman gone, she might stand a chance to at least save Batman and the rest of the world. And then it doesn't work. Superman kills her and flies away, all but unfazed by the injury. Diana literally surrendered her soul, finally gave up and gave in, and it was all for nothing, and she died in the dirt, turned to ash by one of her best friends. I stopped playing for the day after this scene finished playing out, and I realize I'm coming across pretty dramatic right now, and there will be people who say, it's just fiction, none of it's real, but these stories and these characters mean something very deep and important to lots of people, and the utter disregard for the responsibility and privilege to work with these characters really just left me feeling disgusted after Wonder Woman's death scene was done playing out. And it's really a shame too, because Wonder Woman's death is the only one that actually makes sense. Like Superman beating Wonder Woman into the ground and then vaporizing her is something that could happen. All the other deaths are just ridiculous. Now, I think this next point is going to include my final thoughts on this game and what it should have been, and, just a few little things to wrap it up. Now, the main problem, beyond the shitty boss fights or the disrespect to the Justice League or the legacy of the Arkham games or even the memory of Kevin Conroy, is the failure of the tension throughout the game. As I previously mentioned, I think at the very beginning I mentioned this, the very early parts of the game do a good job of establishing the overwhelming threat the League represents when you first interact with Green Lantern and then with Batman. And after experiencing those moments, you believe in the title of the game, the name of the team, the idea that this mission is a suicide mission. And it's unnerving to see your heroes act like psychopaths, but in a good way. It's scary, it's menacing, it sets the tone. In that moment, when you see Green Lantern and Batman doing these horrible things, you know that you don't stand a chance, despite the fact that you're playing a game and in the end you'll win because you're the main character. The threat of failure feels real. It's sort of like when Vader shows up in Fallen Order, even though you're gonna escape when he shows up. It's the fact that you're not even allowed to fight him because he's simply too powerful. It preserves the suspension of disbelief. The problem is, as soon as I killed the Flash, and it wasn't flashy or dramatic or even difficult, all that tension and suspense got ripped out of the game in an instant. The part of the game, the knowledge that the League is overwhelmingly powerful, that was making the evil Justice League concept work, is immediately undercut by how easy and simple it was to defeat Flash. I mean, it genuinely left me in a state of shock every time I killed the next member of the League. I wasn't even really reacting while playing the game. I just couldn't believe how anticlimactic and uncinematic it all was. After I finished the main story, I honestly couldn't believe that this game was the sequel to Arkham Knight and not Gotham Knights. Say what you will about the Gotham Knights. It wasn't the best game, but that game would have been a far better successor, at least in terms of the story, and at the very least, respecting the legacy of the character of Batman and like the Arkham legacy. This game might have worked as a standalone had it been very, very clear that it's an Elseworld story. Because, like I said in the beginning, the gameplay overall isn't too bad, and there are some enjoyable aspects of the game, but this being the final chapter for Arkham Batman and the beginning and end of the Arkham Justice League is just a disgrace. And it only leaves you feeling empty in the end. Which brings me to my final and most important failure of this game before I'll wrap this up. The Batman tribute at the end of the credits for Kevin Conroy made me cry, but not because it was a powerful and moving send-off to a great man, but because it was so unearned by the game and left such a bad feeling in my heart that it made me legitimately upset. You know, I just was like, how dare you try to like play this off as some like honorable send-off to Batman, to Arkham Batman and Kevin Conroy. Like this sucked. This wasn't fun. This doesn't make you feel good about Arkham, like the series, or about all the work and dedication Kevin Conroy put into the role. Anyway, I think that's pretty much all I have to say about this game. As a fan of DC and someone who has spent years garnering appreciation and love for everything DC creates and represents, this is probably my least favorite piece of fiction ever. And I hate this game more than Garfield hates Mondays. So if you bought this game, I hope you enjoy it more than I did. And if you didn't buy it, then I wouldn't recommend it, especially if you are a fan of Arkham or the Justice League. I might make a collectibles guide after this because I'm a sick individual who enjoys torturing himself. But, you know, whatever. All right. Peace, everybody. I'll catch you guys next time.